Today, we're going to do a roundtable discussion with some of your peers. These are companies that have gone through our own incubator program. I think you will find it pretty interesting. And I also wanted to let you all know to be sure to come to class next week. It's my last class at the University of Michigan before I fly west. And I promise it will be a day full of fabulous fun, cash, and prizes. So we'll be mixing it up a little bit for our last class, but you should come. It's going to be a good time. Today, I would like to introduce the managing director of TechArb, which is our student accelerator. His name is Ryan Gourley. Ryan has been a part of the U of M and has been both a teacher as well as an entrepreneur for the better part of the last 10 years. I was thrilled. In fact, I hired Ryan because a couple of years ago, our student incubator was not all that it could be. It had sort of turned into a wasteland of quasi-startups that were camping out or were working feverishly on their very important app of how to get their burrito delivered to Shapiro. And we felt that the program needed a complete overhaul, that we needed to be more rigorous in terms of what the program elements are, and more importantly, more rigorous in the recruitment and the selection of the teams that were part of that program. Ryan has been leading this like a champ. He's one of my proudest hires here at the U of M. Give him a warm 407 welcome, Ryan Gourley.
Thank you, Tom. So as Tom mentioned, my name is Ryan Gourley, and I'm the director of TechArb, which is our Student Venture Accelerator. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about it and what we do to give you some context for the other guests that you're going to meet today. So TechArb has its beginnings back in 2008. It was actually initially started out of another program run by a group of students. And they got together a couple summers in 2008 and 2009, had such a great time with what they were doing that they asked the university to sort of take it under its wings. And so they approached the Center for Entrepreneurship and the Zell Lurie Institute and said, hey, can you make this sustainable? Fortunately, they did, but I think that those roots carry through today. We're very much student-driven, and we're fortunate to have the university's support through such esteemed units as CFE and ZLI. So who we serve, we're looking for what would be called later stage companies here at Michigan. Of course, they're still very, very early as far as a startup goes, but they're companies that are beyond the ideation stage. So they have a relatively good idea of who they are, what they want to do, who they want to do it with, what they want to do it, who they want to do it for. So they have a proven track record of having a high potential for high impact. And that could be through some product development already underway, some traction with customers, market validation. To speak to Tom's point about sort of making sure that we're attracting that sort of talent, we're interested in supporting students who are solving what are interesting problems that are going to still be problems even after the students graduate. So rather than trying to figure out how to get your burrito quicker to Shapiro, we're much more interested in how to get clean water to people in Flint, or how to get food to people in Kenya, as you'll hear today. So how do we do this? We go through 5 stages. The first is prime, and that's where we orient students to the program, to one another, and to the journey they're going to take ahead, sort of get them in the right mindset. Then we connect them to the area mentors, investors, all of our program partners across campus, all of the resources and opportunities that are going to be useful to them over the coming months. Discover, we're focused on problem discovery, customer discovery, competitor discovery, all those things that you need to know if you're going to be viable in the long run. Once they've discovered and once they've figured out exactly what they're doing and who they're doing it for and who else is in the game, we focus on build. And so that's where we can get to prototyping. We also talk about marketing during that phase, legal, finance, sort of pulling together all the elements that are crucial to building a successful, sustainable startup. And then finally launch, where we're focused on pitching, fundraising, selling. And how do we do this? We offer 5 key elements, and they are workspace, access to funding, mentorship, training, and then you'll see that community is in the center, and it sort of weaves itself into all of those. And so I'll talk a little bit about community at the end there. As far as the space goes, we have this space. It's beneath the FedEx and the Lab Coffee on Liberty, if you're not familiar. We're right next door to Menlo. And the students in TechArb have 24/7 access to that space, and we endeavor to get all the resources that they might need. So we have a 3D printer in there, we have a couple Oculus Rifts. Whenever we get a new team that's working on a particular technology that we might be able to support, it's my job to figure out, okay, how do we get them the right tools necessary to do that?
Why, Ryan, it says it's in a basement, but it looks like those are skylights.
Those are Arbor Lights, which is a University of Michigan spin-off, and I had those installed in February because we thought we could use a little more sense of natural light in there. But you would be fooled. If you walk down there, we have plenty of people who are like, wait a minute, isn't there a garage, 7-story garage above us? And it is the case, but your eyes play tricks on you. I would say our greatest asset we have in the space is that glass wall there in the back. And that's because we share that wall with Menlo Innovations, which is a local design and development firm. And they're great mentors to us. We have an open door policy with them. They encourage our students to wander in there and see what they're up to. And likewise, they'll often come into TechArb and see what the students are working on. And they've provided a number of workshops and mentorship opportunities for our students. As far as funding, TechArb currently provides up to $1,000 per team, and that's a milestone award, so it's tied to meeting their goals. Over and above that, I think we do a really good job about connecting students to funding opportunities. So I'm proud to say that of our teams in 2016, over 80% have found some external funding. And much of that is through competitions. Our teams are very successful at competitions. I believe 40% have been competition finalists in 2016. And so this is just a preview. You'll meet some of these folks here today. As far as mentorship, we connect students to experienced mentors in the community, both our local Ann Arbor-based community, statewide community, and even our community nationwide. So we have a lot of alumni and partners in the Bay Area. And so, for example, in October, we had the opportunity to take 3 of our students out there to meet with those alumni and investors. And Eric and Walker, who you'll meet today, were on that trip, so they can speak a little to that as well. In terms of education, every week we have a meeting, an all-hands meeting, where we report out to one another what we're working on, and then the second half of that meeting we'll have a guest lecture from esteemed guests such as Tom Frank, who will be presenting next week. We offer workshops and seminars, and then we work with our partner programs such as the Zell Legal Clinic, the University of Michigan School of Information Design Clinic, to make sure that our students are getting the training and education they need. And then as far as the community, our community is growing, diverse, and engaged. By growing, we're looking at adding approximately 10 teams for every cohort. We'll run 2 cohorts a year. You can see that since 2009, which is when TechArb officially became TechArb, we've graduated about 600 alumni, and we expect to add approximately 50 to 70 to that every year. As in terms of diverse, we're diverse in industry, academics, and demographics. So you can see we have representation in all these sectors: ed tech, fintech, food tech, health tech. Our 2 most popular in 2016 have been food tech and health tech, and I think that's by virtue of the fact that's what our student body is tending to gravitate towards. That's what society is gravitating towards right now. These are pressing issues. And then academics, we have 13 of our 19 schools and colleges represented, so it really is open to anyone. You don't have to be an engineer, you don't have to be a business student. We in fact are drawn to those companies that have, that random person from the School of Social Work on their team who's going to offer this new perspective that hadn't been previously considered. Really, the teams that are strongest are those that are well-rounded and those that can accomplish what they say they want to accomplish. So it's not uncommon to have applicants a group of business students who want to build an app, but they don't yet have that engineer. So if you're considering applying, please make sure that your team is built out and that you guys can build what you hope to.
Is it hard to get in?
It is becoming increasingly difficult to get in. So our application pool is growing, but we're capping it at approximately 10 each cohort. So it's becoming increasingly selective each year. We had a record number of applicants for this past cohort. It was about 50, and as you saw, we have 10, so that's about a 20% selection rate. I imagine we're going to have more and more people apply as we build out the program. So we continue to build out the program. You can see that we're about 2/3 male, 60% male, 40% female. So we really like female entrepreneurs. If there's any in the audience who are starting a venture, please apply. And then we have 50% undergrad and 50% grad. So it's pretty even that way as well. My first cohort last fall, we had freshmen up through postdoc. And I think there's a lot of value to getting people at different levels in their education in the same room. And it's not always the case that the freshmen are learning from the postdoc. In fact, it might be the opposite. And then in terms of some outcomes, our teams that graduate are very engaged. 70% have incorporated, 83% are still active, 100% from the summer are still active. So really it's 83% of the teams that graduated last February are still working on it. 26% have launched their product or their service. And again, 40% have been competition finalists. 4 companies have been accepted into professional accelerators following TechArb, and 4 have received significant investment above $70K up to nearly $2 million.
Creepy hugs are optional.
Say it again.
Creepy hugs are optional.
Creepy hugs are optional. Find me afterwards. Couldn't do any of this without my team, so I'm very happy to have a team of student interns working with me. Allison, Vibhuti, Arjun, and Dave. If you're watching this later, thank you. And follow us on Facebook and social media and all that fun stuff. All right, that is all I have today. So I'm very pleased to introduce Eric Katz of Kulisha, who can tell you what he's working on.
All right, hey everybody. Hope you guys are doing well. So I'm here to talk about my venture Kulisha. So I'll just start with kind of how I got started with that. So I'm a senior, I study business, and I've never been really super interested in a traditional business path. So I kind of did like weird gigs my first few internships. So I did this program called the Doris Duke Conservation Scholars Program. If any of you are freshmen or sophomores, I'd highly recommend it. It's for people of a variety of different disciplines interested in pursuing something related to sustainability. So that was kind of how I got started, and through that I got an internship at a Native American reservation. And my roommate there was actually a guy from Kenya. And so we just started talking, and one day we were just taking a hike. We had a day off. So we were talking about, he was telling me about how where he grew up visiting, commercial fishers were coming in and just really destroying the environment there. It was a really bad situation, and he was feeling really bad about it. So he was actually going to take a semester off to work there. And I work for the William Davidson Institute, which is an institution on campus that focuses on emerging market businesses. So I was talking about insect businesses, and this is where I'll get into Kulisha, what Kulisha is. But about an insect business that creates farmers out of people in rural African countries, rural places in African countries. And so together we came up with this idea of what if you could generate insects to replace the fish? Because the fish that we're destroying as a community are oftentimes going towards a protein-based and animal feed. So if you can't get humans to eat insects, why can't you get animals to eat insects? So that was kind of how Kulisha was born. And what Kulisha is we're a for-profit company that is developing a system that allows waste management systems to integrate the system into their process, and that allows them to grow larvae off their organic waste. So basically, we grow flies on poop is the concept behind the business. But it's a little bit gross. But that's what we do. And we've been really supported by the University of Michigan. We've been really lucky. It really started with the TechArb program. We kind of just came with an idea. We were really excited. It was difficult because he was in Kenya and he goes to Brown University. But we were able to work on this project, and now we've developed it a year later. We've been able to raise some money. We've been able to win some competitions. And the coolest thing is that we've really been able to integrate the University of Michigan into this process to develop the idea. So right now we're working in 2 key teams at the University of Michigan. One, working on the data side, creating like a hardware component and analytics behind data tracking of actually the biology behind the bugs. And then one team actually working on the process engineering, so designing a facility, designing a scale facility and the challenges that come with dealing with such massive amounts of waste. So that's what we're working on. We're Kulisha. If any of you guys are interested in learning more, you feel free to email me. My email is erickatz, eric.katz@umich.edu. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Want to have a seat there? Next, let's hear it for Walker McHugh of Prediction Bio.
Hi everyone, my name is Walker. I'm one of the co-founders at Prediction Bio. Prediction Bio is a precision medicine company which fundamentally changes how we care for the sickest patients in intensive care units. Each year in the United States, there's over 5 million intensive care unit admissions. 80% of these admissions are driven by some sort of out-of-control inflammatory response. So this is typically due to infections, viral bacterial infections, trauma, burn, even complications following surgery. These patients account for almost half of all money spent caring for patients inside of hospitals, almost over $300 billion per year. I think what's most shocking about this, however, is how we care for these patients is essentially unchanged in 30 years. If you're admitted to an intensive care unit today, we simply give you fluids, drugs to support your blood pressure, and then if we think you have an infection, an antibiotic. This is a one-size-fits-all approach, and it fundamentally ignores the underlying biology that drives patients to present to the intensive care unit. Our first product, Microkind, changes this. Microkind is a patent-pending diagnostic platform that allows us to measure a patient's immune response in just 30 minutes from a single drop of blood. So using this information, Microkind actually enables precision medicine in the intensive care unit. Using an algorithm, we're able to identify patients that are at high risk of mortality. These are patients that have greater than a 50% chance of dying during their hospitalization. So once we identify these high-risk patients, we actually then can go in using the same platform, and we profile each patient's individual inflammatory response. And then using that information, we can actually dictate clinical decision-making around the use of specific therapies that target a patient's individual inflammatory response. So today is actually the first day of Michigan Business Challenge, which last year we participated in and actually kind of started me on this journey. And so I'm excited to share a little bit more about that path and get your questions. Thanks.
All right, next let's hear it from Michael Thompson of Neurable.
In March, we saw the launch of the Oculus Rift, which is the first headset to make high-end virtual reality experiences widely accessible. It was followed shortly by the Microsoft HoloLens, which is an augmented reality headset targeted largely for enterprise use cases and businesses. And if these terms are a little unfamiliar, mixed reality, augmented reality, you may be more familiar with it than you realize, because over the summer, our whole country, and in fact the world, was swept up in a global craze, which was the hunt for Pikachu. And it was this mobile game, Pokemon Go, that first introduced millions and millions of people to the concept of augmented reality, the idea that we can overlay virtual objects or holograms on the real world for all kinds of entertaining use cases. Pokemon and Oculus have positioned it around gaming. Microsoft sees augmented reality being used for productivity purposes, but mixed reality can also be social. And so at the end of 2016, we're seeing one more major product launch, which is the Snap glasses from Snap Technologies, better known as Snapchat. And now wearing these glasses with the press of a button, I can live stream video and pictures to all of my friends, and we can use the puppy filter, the rainbow filter, for all kinds of entertainment. And what I think this speaks to is that in 2016, what we see is that computing is becoming increasingly wearable. And in the future, many of the assortment of electronic devices that we use will be replaced by a singular wearable computer. So I invite you to consider the following scene. We see a couple relaxing at home. They're looking for something to watch on TV. And as you look around this room, you notice that there's no television set. There's no computer, no laptop, no iPad, no cell phone on the coffee table. There's also no light switches or no thermostat on the wall. What we believe at Neurable is that in the future, computing will be wearable and that all of these devices will be consolidated. It raises a whole host of interesting questions and challenges, one of which is, how do I interact with a computer that I'm wearing on my face? What is the keyboard and the mouse for wearable computing? Neurable is a brain-computer interface for augmented reality and virtual reality headsets. It is quite literally a platform for controlling computers using your brain activity. Our story starts right here at the University of Michigan with these two wonderful people. Ramses Alkaid is a PhD in neuroscience, and he studies at the lab of Dr. Jane Huggins, who's the principal investigator at Michigan's Direct Brain Interface Laboratory. The particular domain of neuroscience is called electroencephalography. It uses a dry electrode headset to record the electrical activity in someone's brain, and then we use software to analyze their brain waves and try to understand what they're thinking about or what kind of actions they want to select. Ramses has always been interested in how we can use this type of technology to enhance the human experience. Originally, we tested it for children with cognitive disabilities. We eventually began experimenting with much broader use cases and used it in toys, wheelchairs. We even demoed the technology on an episode of a show called Amazing Acts of Science on the Discovery Channel, where we used it to drive a car around a parking lot, again, using only the user's brain activity. What we've done at Neurable, here's a picture of that show. So we said, okay, we've got a pretty cool piece of technology. We're not exactly sure where it belongs yet. We decided to form a company around it, and it was only natural that we would go to TechArb, where we leveraged all of the resources that you heard Ryan describe earlier to help understand how we take this technology and turn it into a product. We decided to do the tour of the business plan competitions available here at the university, received a lot of mentorship from Jim and Ann and Josh at the Zell Lurie Institute for Entrepreneurship. We were finalists in the Michigan business plan competition last year. We were also finalists in CFE's The Startup. But where we had our first major breakthrough was at a business plan competition at Rice University, where we took a second place overall prize and were awarded over $300,000 in cash prizes. We decided to form a core team, graduating from student startup to, okay, we're going to be a real company now. The core team was myself, Ramses, James, and Adam, all University of Michigan graduates. And for our company's progress, we decided that we were going to relocate to Cambridge, Massachusetts. This is our office that we fondly refer to as the Neurable Tech Lab. As our company's progressed, we've started adding new team members. This is Alex, working on the augmented reality headset, the Microsoft HoloLens, which he programs for. And this is myself, actually, just yesterday, wearing both an EEG cap and a virtual reality headset and using my brain activity to play video games. This is just a short vision of the wearable computing future that we envision at Neurable, in which brain-computer interfaces will form the new standard for human and computer interaction. Thank you.
Thank you. First thing I would like to ask each of you, it has been said that waiting for perfect is never as smart as making progress. What are your thoughts on that as it relates to your own ventures?
Yeah. Hello. All right, it's got a green light now. But so I can relate to this. Just yesterday, we were actually having a meeting trying to think about how we can test a conveyor belt system to bring waste to these larval growth units. And perfect, what is it, waiting for progress is never...
Waiting for perfect is never as smart as making progress.
Okay, waiting for perfect. So what we, as opposed to like trying to, we were like, somebody said maybe we should like buy a treadmill, which would be perfect. That's exactly a conveyor belt. But what we actually ended up doing was like Googling a contraption where you can just use toilet paper rolls and pens to turn a conveyor belt, to test how waste might move on a conveyor belt. So that was, as opposed to like waiting to do that, we were able to do that in the moment and found out that it worked pretty well. So now we can move to a next step and try to progress just a little bit farther.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a much simpler way of saying that is simply fail fast, which I think around startups gets said quite a bit. But it's really true. I think always the unknown is 1,000 times worse than the known. And often how you find out about the known is you make a mistake, and then you use that information to move forward. And so I think that's kind of the core. It's actually what makes startups the most fun, is you get to make mistakes, and it's okay. It's actually the way that things are meant to be done.
I think we hear these things over and over again because we need to constantly remind ourselves of them. I think that a lot of people who are drawn to solving big problems and doing it well tend to be perfectionists. I'm going to venture to guess I'm not the only perfectionist on stage here. But I constantly have to tell myself, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. And this is the same concept as fail fast in this. And I tell my students that as well. And the program I started back in last fall, in 2015, that Eric was a part of, looks almost nothing like what it currently looks like. But I was able to just iteratively build on it, and the program next fall is going to look drastically different than the program that Walker was a part of. So I think it's crucial that you just be patient and iteratively build on what you're doing.
I've got 2 mics now.
Ah, great. As do I.
In a former life, I was a military officer, and one very important maxim that they teach you is that a good plan executed today is far more valuable than a perfect plan executed tomorrow. And so what I think that speaks to is that there is an urgency to what we do, right? And I think it's very, very similar in startups, that time is a factor, that urgency matters, and that it's extremely important to take action and then to learn in the environment as things progress.
That's a great answer. Travis Kalanick, the founder of Uber, a sort of controversial fellow, has been quoted with regard to the concept of standing your ground. Stand by your principles and be comfortable with confrontation. So few people are, so when the people with the red tape come, it becomes a negotiation. Who has thoughts on that? I want to start with you as the former military officer.
One more time, can you say it again?
Stand by your principles and be comfortable with confrontation. So few people are, so when people with the red tape come, it becomes a negotiation.
Yeah, so conflict is essential to success in a business, and at first that might sound counterintuitive, but it's important to distinguish between task-oriented conflict versus personality-oriented conflict. So where startups get into trouble is when the founders or the early employees or whatever start blaming each other for things that are going wrong as we're failing fast, right? You need to keep your focus on task-oriented conflict, which is how do we debate and experiment and analyze to produce, the best possible results. So you should not be afraid of conflict, but everyone in the business has to have the maturity to keep it task-oriented rather than personal.
Anybody else? You're such a nice guy. I can't think of being confrontational.
I think, I don't know if I totally agree with that exact quote. I want to push back a little bit that maybe confrontation isn't the right word. Maybe replacing that with like just trying to push back on ideas and being open-minded about it is obviously very important to challenge ideas and see what new things can come up and try to identify flaws. But I don't know if I agree with confrontation. I don't know if you should like try to find an issue in everything. But I totally understand what he's saying. That's right. Yeah, exactly. But I see what he's saying, and that's a totally valid viewpoint as well.
Yeah, I think conflict and challenge, I think, might be another way to say that. And I think surrounding, as a founder in these early stage businesses where the core teams are so small, finding people that are comfortable with you challenging them, and I think more importantly that they challenge kind of what you hold to be the central truth of whatever you're trying to do can be some of the most meaningful and actually valuable sorts of people.
So folks from Andreessen Horowitz have been quoted as saying that venture capitalists with a knack for the 1000x know that true innovation doesn't follow a pattern. In what ways do you think your company is a true innovation? Well, you still got the mic, Walker, so we'll let you talk first.
So I'm fairly upfront with like our challenges, I think. So we're basically trying to commercialize a breakthrough technology that's approximately 100 to 1000x faster than the current gold standard and apply it to a medical marketplace, which I don't know if you're familiar with the FDA, but essentially there's a fair amount of regulatory challenges that also exist for us. And then if we're all ultimately successful, we completely and fundamentally change how medicine is practiced in one of the largest sectors of healthcare. And so that's, yeah, that's, that's how we're innovative.
Anybody else will take a stab at that? He's passing that mic back to you.
So
Flies on poop sounds like
who's seen that before? But yeah, I don't know. I think the way that we try to be innovative, I guess, is just constantly not conflicting each other, but challenging each other and trying to pivot the idea. So the original idea started as we would use those flies to make a food for fish farmers in Africa. And then it's over the course of a year, it's progressed to just developing a system that allows waste management companies to grow flies. So I don't want to say that like we're like the most innovative company. There's always competitors. There's always people that are doing what you're trying to do. But I think how we try to be the best that we can is just by just like constantly challenging ourselves and not getting too locked into one idea.
And recognizing that Nurable's in a field that's becoming increasingly crowded because it's going to be such a hot field, how does Nurable differentiate itself, or why are you so passionate about what's innovative about you?
So there are a lot of companies doing some aspect of virtual reality, augmented reality these days. There's a ton of different headset manufacturers out there. There's people moving into content, trying to create platforms. What we are doing right now is we are positioning ourselves for the second generation of virtual and augmented reality. You will not see neural interfaces in obviously in the first generation of headsets. It might be the second or even the third generation of AR and VR in which you'll see BCIs introduced. So what we're doing is it's very much a long-term play. This is not a fast-to-market product. We're iterating in the sense that we're not making marginal improvements to an existing business model or an existing technology, but trying to truly build something that will create an industry that did not exist previously.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more, then I'm going to turn it over to Ryan. Be honest. We all agree we're going to be honest. It's a short answer. Paul Graham, who's the founder of Y Combinator, says, it's hard to do a really good job at anything that you don't think about in the shower. Do you guys think about your companies in the shower?
So, yeah, I guess. So I started this, not company, but I've been working on this project here at the university. So I came here to start. So I'm currently a graduate student in biomedical engineering here at the university. And I was here, not sitting in the seat because this didn't exist when I was an undergrad, but went here for undergrad as well. And met my co-founder, Tim Cornell, who's a pediatric intensivist at the Children's Hospital as a freshman. So I've been working on this, essentially the fundamental science that underlies our venture for 6 to 7 years now. And it's just something from the get-go that I was incredibly passionate about. I think it's hard to go into an intensive care unit and look parents in the eye and not be moved by that experience and think that there's a better way that this can be done. So, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think
if your
that's
story
true.
involved pooping, it would probably be better.
I think about, yeah, I do, yeah, a little bit. But, yeah, I don't try to develop the idea in the shower. I just try to think about the idea in the shower. But no, going back to the main point is just that you're always, that like, it's just something that enters your mind whenever you can. You're always thinking about it and thinking how you can improve it. And I think that's absolutely true. I mean, whether it's showering or like brushing your teeth or you're about to go to sleep or like whether you're actually working on it, you're always trying to like look into what's wrong with your own idea and how can you improve it. Because there's always something wrong. There's always something that you can do better. So I think that's a good quote.
I think the best way to say it is that entrepreneurship is a lifestyle. If you do it correctly, it's a lifestyle. It's not just a job. It's certainly not a 9-to-5. It is something that you live and experience 24/7. And yes, I think about it in the shower and everywhere else.
Can I ask one more?
Of course you can. This is your show, Tom.
So then, because another quote I have is there's only one success, to be able to spend your life in your own way, which is what you just suggested. If you guys weren't doing this, what would you be doing?
That's a tough one.
If I wasn't growing flies on poop, what would I be doing? Well, probably 2 years ago, I would probably. 2 years ago, I probably would have said, I hope I'm not growing flies on poop. But yeah, maybe I would be in the fashion industry. But probably, I don't know, I'd probably try to stick with my path of like conservation and sustainability. That was something that I kind of like had that internal struggle with a lot going through my first 2 years of undergrad, because the business program definitely tries to funnel you a certain way, consulting, investment banking. But I always viewed it as really important for me, just because of my values, that I do something that's just fun, something that I know that I enjoy doing. And I enjoyed like being on the reservation and like working with wildlife there. So I think that's what I would probably be doing, even though like being an entrepreneur is a mindset. And I would like to be doing something else entrepreneurial, but if that wasn't an option, then.
Well, as a follow-on, this week's reading talked about ways that you invest in yourself. So how do you invest in yourself?
So I this year actually I started trying to invest in myself more, because I thought I was like just putting myself to work so much, or too much. So I tried to take an hour every day, or at least a couple nights a week, just to like relax, or like just listen to music, where I'm just like doing nothing except for something that I would want to do. Listen to music, reading, or just like writing about my day. Something that doesn't involve me like looking at a screen, and just like relaxing. And I think that's helped so much, because it's allowed me to really look like have time to reflect on like what I'm doing as a person, as opposed to like what I'm doing with my business.
And Nerval says you won't have to look at a screen, right? So,
One day you won't.
So do you know what else you'd be doing and how you invest in yourself?
I would not be working at a big company. I can tell you that. I've had the big company, big institution experience. When I came back to business school, I knew I wanted to get away from big corporate environments, and I wanted to do something in startups. If I hadn't been fortunate enough to meet Ramses and get involved in brain-computer interfaces, I'm very interested in cryptocurrency, in things like Bitcoin and blockchain, and I probably would have pursued a business in that area. Investing in yourself it's a great point to bring up, even though I just said a minute ago that I'm constantly thinking about my business. You absolutely need time away. For me, exercise is really important. I make it a point to get up every morning and run or get to the gym. It makes me feel healthier, and I think I'm more productive at work that way. The last thing I would just say is that you have to read. You have to read about your industry, about everything tangential to your industry, and then about everything that might one day be tangential to your industry. You must be a subject matter expert. I think that's a very important form of self-development as well.
That's great. Well,
So if I wasn't doing this today, I'm not sure, but I'm actually going to flip this back on you guys. So as students, as undergrads at the university, you guys literally have like an outrageous opportunity. There's not going to be a time in your life ever where you can sit in a room for an hour every Friday, listen to people come and talk to you, figure out what you're passionate about, meet like-minded students, have access to world-class faculty in essentially about every topic, medical, engineering, law, business, art, design, it's all here. Once you leave here, you don't have access to that again. So do not let that opportunity slip past you.
all right, Ryan, you're driving.
All right. So you guys talked a bit about sort of what brought you, like Walker, you told us about what started this journey in the short term. I'm curious, what are the very beginnings of your entrepreneurial journey? What turned you on to this life at all? Because as I think we've heard, it consumes your life, and it's not something to be taken lightly. So I'm realizing I'm talking with two mics again. Hopefully that's okay for you guys. But Walker, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think I'm not exactly sure where the entrepreneurial journey started. I suppose about a year ago. So I've been working on this kind of the science that underlies this, the kind of underlying biology that causes kids and adults to become very ill, and then the underlying kind of technology allows us to measure these things in patients very rapidly. But to do that and actually see an impact in patients is something that takes an incredible amount of time, typically. And about 2 years ago, we had a very unique opportunity and situation that presented itself. We had a child that was admitted to the intensive care unit here at the University of Michigan and was treated with an experimental cancer therapy that caused her to basically have one of these overwhelming inflammatory responses. And we had been presenting our research, and the doctors came to us and said, this child is going to die essentially unless we know which one of these life-saving medicines to give to her. And this is information that we wouldn't have access to without your technology. And there's a very special FDA program that exists to allows basically patients that would die otherwise access to unapproved medical devices. And so we were able to actually get approval. We had to, obviously approach the patient and her family and explain to them the situation. And they agreed to try it. And thank God it worked. And so from that point, that was really like, wow, this is real. Like, we can really impact people's lives. So a year ago, NBC came around, and I thought, well, the other thing I haven't shared with you is I have a wife and a family. So my day is pretty full: research, school, family. And I knew that I was never going to do the actual, like, how to form a business behind this unless I had someone holding my feet to the fire, telling me how to build a 10-slide pitch deck or a 10-page business plan. And so I essentially used the Michigan Business Challenge as kind of like Kaplan, studying for your SAT or whatever, to just kind of force me to do it.
Cool. And it's a tough thing to follow up. That's impressive. But and just going back to the question again, the question is, how do you...
What would you say was the very beginnings of this entrepreneurial sort of bug? When did that bite?
That's so hard. Honestly, I don't think I have an answer for that. Either it was just, I was interested in the concept of entrepreneurship. It just sounded like a cool thing to me. Like startups, you get to be like flexible, you can do what you want. It's obviously appealing. Yeah, nobody tells you to do mostly. But so I decided to like use a resource at ZLI called the Marcel Ghani Internship. If any of you guys are interested in like working for a startup, I'd recommend that. It just like pairs you with the startup. So I worked for a startup in Detroit called Are You a Human? Liked it, wasn't like super crazy about it, but figured like, hey, maybe I'll just like try to come up with something, some sort of idea that I can at least pursue, because Michigan does have like so many resources. As you were talking about, I'm coming up on like my junior year. I need to like use them if I'm going to. Yeah. So I think that's really where it came out of, like necessity, me feeling like I really wanted to try something new. And then I think through that process, I actually found out that I was more entrepreneurial than I thought I originally was.
Yeah, I would say for me, it was really important to recognize that I needed a sense of like pride and ownership in what I was doing. That was something that I experienced in the Army. It was one of the things I really enjoyed about the Army. And I knew that whatever I did after business school, I needed to have that same sense of like being part of a team that was on a mission to do something important. And I was very fortunate to become involved in a startup that gives me that sense of being part of like a meaningful team and doing something that hopefully will have an impact on the world.
Great, and you're definitely doing that. So this the entrepreneurial journey is full of a lot of twists and turns, highs and lows. Can you tell us, can you share with us some of those highs and lows? And so we end on a high note, maybe you start with the lows. What are some tough decisions that you've had to make, some tough calls where were you like, you know what, this sucks and I'm like this close to the door?
Wow. Never been at the door.
Okay.
I think it takes a certain amount of blind conviction that you're just gonna stick with this, to the bitter end, whatever that looks like. The low moment, I'd say I would call them hard moments, were that last year we tried to go out and raise a round of funding, and for a long time we were unsuccessful. Like, we wanted to launch this business at the end of the school year last May. It requires money to pay people's salaries. We need employees, right? And for a long time although there was a lot of interest, we just were not being successful in getting the first check in. Eventually, that changed when we had our success at the Rice University Business Plan competition. But the interesting thing was everybody kept working for about 2 months with no paycheck. We had five or six people who were working full-time for 2 months with no paycheck. So as a co-founder and a manager, I felt a sense of responsibility, like I need to find money to pay my employees, like I owe that to them, right? But at the same time, it was kind of a high moment in seeing the team coalesce and stick together, even though there was a lot of uncertainty about what was going to happen.
We are timing out quickly, so.
I'll be fast. So the other great thing about TechArb that I think Ryan mentioned at the beginning, which I didn't certainly appreciate going into TechArb, was the community. And a lot of that, honestly, is just surrounding yourself with people that are they don't have the same business as you, but it's a similar shared experience of going through and trying to do something that a lot of people are saying that, do you really want to do this? And just being able to talk with people and have kind of a shared understanding of what it's like to go through that process.
All right, your fast, low, or high?
I don't think I have a great answer to that question, so maybe I'll go real quick. I think the low is just like working through some of these challenges that everybody on the team might not be okay with, and you have to find a way to come to some sort of agreement. That's something that you'll face in anything that you do, but I'd say that was a challenge.
All right, everybody, have a great weekend. Thank you very much. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to Ryan.
She was unaware of them. I felt like a fish trapped in a small little bowl, wanting to leap out and to enter into an ocean that is full of life. And I think this hopefully illustrates a little bit about the desire